අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නායට වටිනා tab computers සහ data දීමනා. අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නායට වටිනා tab computers සහ data දීමනා.
පැස් සබන් බිලිඳ සම්ට විශේෂයෙන්ම නිෂ්පාදිතයි. SLS ප්‍රමිති සහතිකය සහිතයි.
Tonight, adding fuel to the fire, Sri Lanka tells the UNHRC that its methods can only worsen the situation.
Sri Lanka once again reiterates its view that the evidence gathering mechanism is unhelpful, will polarize Sri Lankan society and adversely affect economic development.
Ramping up, fears of escalation rise after report of Russian armoured convoy heading towards Kiev. In time of need, Ukrainian tourists get visa extensions as local hoteliers set up to help with free accommodation. Watchful and waiting, local tea and rubber exporters weighing on the impact of the Ukraine crisis.
If the crisis is not resolved in the near future, it could definitely affect the tea prices in the long term.
We will also see price escalations of further for raw materials and energy. So these are going to impact our production cycles and product.
All that and much more coming up on First at 9, this Tuesday, the 1st of March, 2022.
100ක් දක්වා ඉසොරි නැති 100ක් සුසිනිඳු කෙස් කලමක් ලබා දේ. Dove Anti-Dandruff.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Hamke. Now then, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, is set to present an update on Sri Lanka's human rights situation to the Human Rights Council tomorrow, with Sri Lanka having the chance to respond the day after. With setting up of an evidence-gathering mechanism in the island for future prosecutions being a flashpoint, analysts say that the island should not commit to anything which falls outside the country's constitution. But activists see the situation differently, saying that the criticisms levelled in the Human Rights Chief's report aren't wrong. The 49th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council is currently underway in Geneva until the 1st of April. The human rights situation on Sri Lanka, as well as an interactive dialogue on the written update of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights on promoting reconciliation and accountability in the island, is also to be worked off tomorrow. Prior to the session, UN Human Rights Commissioner Michelle Bachelet outlined several areas of concern pertaining to the human rights situation in the island in her report, which was published last Friday. The report is based on the Resolution 46/1, accusing Sri Lanka of a further drift towards militarisation, erosion of judiciary independence and discrimination against minority communities. One of the key and controversial elements of the resolution is the setting up of an evidence-gathering office in the island, aimed at future prosecutions. One observer believes that the government shouldn't agree to anything that veers away from the country's constitution.
The establishment of an institution to monitor Sri Lanka's activities, we have not agreed to that. And the main position that we have taken in the past, and I'm sure will be taken by the government also, is the absolute supremacy of the Sri Lankan constitution. Our constitution defines certain things, and whatever the various suggestions may be, we cannot agree to anything that infringes on the basics of our basic law, the constitution.
I agree with the High Commissioner wholeheartedly. There is certainly grossly insufficient progress as far as mechanisms and work with regard to reconciliation and transitional justice. There is nothing that has really happened with regard to accountability, and that is a key question. There is a unit now set up within the High Commissioner's office to deal with accountability, and so that work will continue, no doubt.
An expert, meanwhile, believes that there might be a way to counter the setting up of an evidence-gathering mechanism in the island.
My question is whether UNHRC has a power to implement that mechanism in Sri Lanka. Legally, they cannot do it. only thing what they can do, UNHRC mechanism is advisory role, promote and support the country for what they are doing. That is the mandate. But the 46-1 resolution at say other proceeding, that other proceeding is always LTT remnants and international so-called justice project, and looking at the heavily biased to the other side of the story, and they want to go with the universal jurisdiction. But there is a very strong argument it interferes with the Sri Lanka's sovereignty. If this happens, there is a mechanism we can go to the International Court of Justice and file against that the particular group or particular country, and they are interfering with the country's sovereignty.
In any case, Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Piris left no space for doubt as to what the government thinks of the so-called evidence-gathering mechanism. Addressing the UNHRC yesterday, he rejected what he termed punitive, politicised and divisive methods used by the Council to gather evidence against Sri Lanka on alleged war crimes. He added that such methods would only serve to polarise the country. Another critical area the UNHRC is exerting pressure on Sri Lanka is its Prevention of Terrorism Act. Bachelet calls for a moratorium on the use of the PTA until it is replaced by legislation that fully complies with international human rights norms and standards. This, however, comes at the heels of the government tabling amendments to the PTA in Parliament with the very same objective. Speaking at our current affairs programme at Hyde Park with Indiva Riamuatta, EU Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Denny Shaibi, gave the EU's take on the said amendments.
The government has tabled a possible reform of the PTA. So what the EU did on the 8th of February, we had a joint commission where we noted and welcomed the fact that these amendments have been tabled, but we noted that some elements were still missing. And so we invited the Sri Lankan authorities to do more regarding this reform.
Meanwhile, the UN Human Rights High Commissioner has told Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith, that she will release a statement on Sri Lanka's Easter Sunday terror attacks investigation progress. She had said so when the Cardinal held talks with her today on the matter and sought support to bring justice to the victims of the attack. Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith, toured the Vatican last week and held talks with His Holiness the Pope. The talks were part of what he termed seeking international help to seek justice for the victims of the Easter Sunday terror attacks. The Cardinal then set off for Geneva, and this morning he held talks with the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, on the same topic. He had told Bachelet that despite some 3 years having passed since the crime, justice for the victims has not been forthcoming. The Cardinal had pointed out to the UN Human Rights Chief that the present government isn't showing any diligence in ensuring justice for the attack's victims, as well as in revealing the truth behind the attacks. He had also expressed disappointment over the conduct of the Attorney General's department. During the discussion, which had lasted for almost an hour, the Cardinal had requested Bachelet to lend any manner of support to his quest for justice. In response, the UN Human Rights Commissioner had said that she will be issuing a statement on the matter in the near future. Moving on with other local stories, the Public Utilities Commission confirmed that the 7.5-hour power cut schedule will continue tomorrow as well. Meanwhile, PUCSL Chairman Janaka Ratnayaka stated that the President has assured immediate steps to bring about an end to the power crisis in the country through Treasury and Central Bank interventions. With that, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation confirmed the payment of $31 million for a shipment of diesel that arrived today.
The Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka announced the rolling power cut schedule for tomorrow. Accordingly, the public can expect a total of 7.5 hours of power interruptions during the day in 2 stages. The first stage will see a 5-hour power cut in the daytime hours between 8 am and 6 pm and another 2.5-hour power cut between 6 pm and 11 pm. Zones E, T, U and V will experience daytime power cuts from 8 am to 1 pm tomorrow and nighttime power cuts from 6 pm to 8:30 pm. Areas designated as groups F, P, Q, R and S are set to experience daytime power interruptions from 1 pm to 6 pm and again from 8:30 pm to 11 pm. Meanwhile, Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka Chairman Janaka Ratnayaka announced today that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has offered an assurance to the public that steps will be taken to bring about a solution to the current electricity crisis in the country. Ratnayaka also revealed that this includes steps by the Treasury and the Central Bank to ensure a steady process of fuel imports for power generation with immediate effect. Meanwhile, a ship carrying 37,000 metric tons of diesel arrived in Sri Lanka today. Following this, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation confirmed that the government has released $31 million as payment for the shipment. The CPC also announced that the unloading of fuel stocks had already commenced by this afternoon. Meanwhile, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has dealt the country's hopes of easing its fuel issues a further blow. Oil benchmarks hit multiple price and spread milestones across several key markets today as the fallout from severe sanctions on key oil exporter Russia sowed confusion and panic among global crude oil traders, shipping firms and importers. Brent crude topped $112 a barrel, its highest levels in over 7 years, despite plans by International Energy Agency members to release a record 60 million barrels from the strategic petroleum reserves to cool prices. With that, refiners in Asia and Europe were expected to seek more supplies from the Middle East and the United States to replace crude supplies from Russia and Central Asia, sources said, even as official selling prices for Saudi crude are set to hit record highs in April.
Now then, a report compiled by a committee appointed by the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka has concluded that sabotage can't be ruled out in the island-wide blackout that the country experienced last November and December. The committee also noted that its conclusion was based on inability of Ceylon Electricity Board officials to present definitive proof of their reasoning. The report has hence recommended a full investigation by law enforcement authorities to determine the truth.
On the 3rd of December 2021, Sri Lanka experienced a second island-wide blackout after a previous partial system failure was experienced on the 29th of November. According to the Ceylon Electricity Board, the reason for the outage was a malfunction at 3 substations that supply power to the national grid. The outage also came at a time when CB unions were engaged in a work to rule campaign in protest of the sale of the Yugadanavi LNG power plant to US company New Fortress. At the time, higher-ups at the CEB called the disruptions possible acts of sabotage carried out by trade unions. This claim was rejected by trade union representatives, who explained that it was a natural occurrence that led to the breakdown. They explained that the country's coal power plant in Norochole had tripped and all power generation had come to a standstill. Following this, the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka appointed a committee chaired by PUCSL Deputy Chairman Professor Janaka Ekanayaka to investigate the power outage and come up with the real reasons behind them. Now, after months of investigations, the report has been released and sabotage is yet to be ruled out. Among its recommendations are calls for a formal investigation to be launched by law enforcement agencies due to what it says is a lack of definitive proof provided by CB engineers to back up their version of events. Further, although the committee was set up to probe the 3rd December blackout, it also examined the 29th November blackout as well, due to similarities between the two incidents. In its conclusions, the 7-member committee says that it has not found sufficient grounds to completely eliminate the allegation that the incidents on December 3rd and November 29, 2021 could have been pre-planned or caused by deliberate actions. The reason, it explains, is that CEB personnel could not explain some key events such as the erroneous operation of end-fault protection and wrong configuration of line protection relays of the Kotmale-Biagama 220 kV transmission line. They explained that the total blackout on December 3rd had been triggered by Circuit 1 on the Kotmale-Biagama 220 kV transmission wire that tripped a full 22.33 seconds after the initial glitch in Circuit 2 had stabilized within 288 milliseconds and the system had returned to normal. Explanations provided by CB officials to the committee called it an earth fault in a single phase, but failed to provide definitive proof. Further, the committee also points out that the 29th November outage showed a similar tripping signal, but CB engineers had failed to investigate this and no corrective action was taken. If this was done, it says, the second blackout could have been avoided. In addition, the committee has also found further anomalies, namely a possible tampering with data in the main 2 relay records at the Kotmale substation. The probes had found that certain records relating to lines 1 and 2 during the 3rd December incident were not available. The CB's explanation for this is that it could have been an overwriting of data due to internal memory storage issues. However, the report says that once again the CB was unable to show it any statement in the manufacturer's literature of the record system that confirmed this position. This has led the committee to express uncertainty whether records have been altered and call for further investigations.
We will see you shortly on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back to First at 9. Now, the Attorney General's Department today informed the Supreme Court that the one-time surcharge tax of 25% proposed by the government would include 13 retirement funds, including the Employees' Provident Fund and the Employees' Trust Fund. This was stated when petitions filed against the government surcharge tax bill were taken up before a 3-member judge bench of the Supreme Court today. The petitions filed against the government surcharge tax bill were taken up before a 3-member judge bench of the Supreme Court today. During the proceedings, the AG's department submitted a letter directed to the Attorney General by the Secretary to the Finance Ministry containing the proposed amendments to the bill. The AG's department said that the letter also contains several amendments proposed to be made to the relevant bill during the committee stage debate in Parliament. It added that the proposed tax excludes 13 retirement funds, including the Employees' Provident Fund and the Employees' Trust Fund. Further, in the case of a partnership, the income of a partner derived from a partnership shall not be taken into account when calculating the taxable income of such partner as an individual if the tax has been paid by the partnership in such taxable income. What's more, on each company of a group of companies of which the aggregate of the taxable income of all subsidiaries and the holding company in that group of companies having an income of over 2 billion rupees, a 25% surcharge tax will be charged on the taxable income. Opposition party Samagi Jana Balaveke is among 10 parties which filed petitions challenging the surcharge tax bill, highlighting that it also includes the EPF and the ETF. Before the petitions were filed, however, Finance Minister Basil Rajpaksha had given assurance that the relevant amendments will be made at the committee stage to exclude the two funds as well as several others. Now then, Sri Lankan shares fell more than 1% today after 2 sessions of strong gains weighed down by losses in industrial and financial stocks. The CSE All Share Price Index ended down 1.48% at 11,406.34 after posting gains of more than 4% in the previous 2 sessions, while the market was shut yesterday. Accordingly, the S&P SL 22 saw a heavy dip of 1.94% to close at 3,860.24. Market turnover was 3.074 billion rupees. Meanwhile, the European stock sagged and oil jumped back above $100 a barrel today as markets struggled with deep uncertainty caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, though the ruble steadied as Moscow scrambled support for its beleaguered markets. Russia's markets remained suspended and some bond trading platforms were no longer displaying prices, but dealing in major financial centers in Europe and in Asia overnight was orderly, albeit jittery. Losses for the Pan-European Stock 600 were starting to mount again, with the index down 1.31% in mid-afternoon session, and Wall Street was down about 1% in morning trade. Bank stocks slumped 4% as investors sensed that interest rate hikes might now be delayed. Now, once again, the Sri Lankan rupee continued to stay at 202.99 cents against the US dollar. Now, let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee fared against other major currencies during the day. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz confirmed today that NATO has no intention of getting military involved in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Speaking in Jerusalem, Scholz called on the Russian government to immediately cease its attacks on Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Russian government says that although it is ready for a second round of talks, it is doubtful about Ukraine's future presence.
The Kremlin said Russian officials were ready to hold a second round of talks with Ukraine today, but it was not clear if Ukrainian officials would turn up. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said there was a contradictory information about the talks which would follow a meeting at the Belarusian border on Monday that failed to produce a breakthrough. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Tuesday that Russia must stop the bombing of Ukrainian cities before talks could take place. Peskov also said Moscow needed to formulate a harsh, thought-out and clear response against measures imposed by Western countries to undermine the Russian economy. Meanwhile, Russian troops approached Ukraine's second-largest city, Kharkiv, about 12 miles south of the border from Russia this morning. Intense street fighting is being reported in the city after Russian troops entered it. The Russian advance came after a huge explosion at a gas pipeline on the edge of the city. In addition, a regional police department in Kharkiv was engulfed in flames today following a Russian missile strike. Authorities said that Russian missile attacks had hit the center of Kharkiv, including residential areas and its regional administration building. At least 21 people have been reported killed and 112 wounded in the shelling of Kharkiv in the last 24 hours, its regional governor revealed today, while warning civilians to stay inside and not to leave their homes. Russian troops approached the city about 12 miles south of the border from Russia shortly after the invasion was ordered by President Putin last Thursday. Until today, the heavily armed soldiers had remained on the city's outskirts without trying to enter it. Meanwhile, an attack by Russian forces on a television tower in Kyiv has killed 5 people, the Ukrainian emergency services said yesterday in a television statement. In the meantime, during a joint news conference with Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett in Jerusalem today, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said that NATO will not intervene militarily in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Our line is clear. We will not intervene militarily. That applies to NATO. It won't do that, and for all others. In this situation, that would be wrong. Scholz, on his first visit to Israel, called on Russian President Vladimir Putin to stop all hostilities immediately. First of all, as a country who itself has much experience, unfortunately, in war, we call for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine, and we identify with the citizens that are under considerable danger and stress in Kyiv, in Krakow, in the south, and in other locations. We are helping and assisting Ukraine considerably. Just yesterday, we sent over 3 airplanes filled with roughly 100 tons of medicines and other humanitarian aid.
Now then, Russian and Belarusian athletes can compete as neutrals at the Winter Paralympics in Beijing, despite calls to ban them following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, for which Belarus has been a key staging area. Now, this was confirmed by the International Paralympic Committee today. The International Olympic Committee this week recommended that sports federations suspend teams and athletes from the 2 countries, but added that they could compete as neutrals if time or legal constraints prevented their removal. The IPC said that they will compete under the Paralympic flag and not be included in the medal table. It added that its decision was guided by the IPC's core principles, which include a commitment to political neutrality and impartiality and an unwavering belief in the transformative power of sport. A number of sports federations, including World Football governing body FIFA, have banned teams and athletes from Russia and Belarus. The games will run from the 4th to the 13th of March. Now then, Russian Formula 1 drivers have been banned from competing in the UK by the National Motorsports Authority. Motorsport UK will refuse to recognise licences of competitors from the Russian Federation until further notice. It means Russian drivers cannot race in July's British Grand Prix even if they continue to be a part of a team. Motorsport UK's decision comes in the wake of the FIA, the international governing body's decision to allow Russians to compete in events but ban teams from the country. The Motorsports UK chair is thought to have voted against the FIA's decision at today's meeting of its World Motorsport Council. A statement from Motorsport UK stated that no Russian or Belarusian licensed teams are approved to enter motorsport competitions in the UK, and no Russian or Belarusian licensed competitors and officials are approved to participate in UK motorsport events. It also added that the sanctions had been taken in consultation with the UK government. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.